Welcome to Tallect Talks, where we dive deep into the evolving world of work, talent, and rewards, and bring to you candid conversations with the sharpest minds in HR. Today's episode is going to be packed with insights, and it's going to be very exciting if you've ever been part of mergers and acquisitions, or you're preparing to lead one. We are thrilled to be joined by Prajakta Kanglekar, seasoned HR leader, who has not just seen merger and acquisition implementations from inside, but has played a very critical role in terms of navigating it through empathy, strategy, and structure. In this conversation, we will explore why M&As often fail from a people lens, how to drive culture harmonization between merging entities, key frameworks for talent retention, leadership alignment, and communication, and how HR can evolve from being transactional to becoming the strategic glue that holds integration together. So if you're looking for real-world insights on making M&As not just work, but thrive through a people-first approach, you're in the right place. Let's jump in. Welcome, Prajakta, once again.
Hi, thank you so much, Neha. Excited to be here with you.
Equally excited, Prajakta. So let's start with your overall experience. Can you walk us through your involvement in any major M&As which you have been part of? We would like to really hear the role of HR from day 0 to day 100.
Okay. So, well, if I look at my experience, right? Primarily, most of my career has been in General Electric and in Flipkart. And that's where I've seen mergers and acquisitions happen. One of the ones that I've been involved in at the very early stages in my leadership journey was the one where Baker Hughes and GE's oil and gas business merged together globally. In India, I was the HR leader for South Asia and got an opportunity to actually lead it for the region. In Flipkart, in one of my first roles, which was org and talent development, I was handling multiple COEs, 6 COEs to be exact, from performance to talent development to inclusion and diversity, people analytics, leadership development, as well as the overall functional and behavioral learning. In that role, I got an opportunity to be part of the M&A team for when we bought Flipkart Health, ClearTrip, the Walmart B2B stores. And so very, very rich learning experience as you see it, from start to finish, right? So to answer the second question that you had, which is the role that HR plays, I would actually increase the window. It's not 0 to 100. It's probably minus many days, which starts with due diligence from the time you start figuring out whether this is the right acquisition for you or the right party to merge with for you. And HR is part of the due diligence team, right from the beginning. To the time where the merger has happened, you have had, let's say, the first 6 months to settle things down. But that doesn't end in 6 months, right? You have to be vigilant and at least keep a year of horizon to a year and a half to ensure that the outcomes that you wanted, especially in HR, when it comes to culture and people, the outcomes take time.
Right.
And so you have to keep a track and measure whether the success outcomes you wanted are actually, coming to life or not.
From your perspective, what are the most common reasons M&A deals struggle? And especially when it comes to the people and culture side of integrations.
See, all of us are aware of statistics. The statistics that are most widely quoted come from HBR, where they say 70 to 90% of all M&As generally result in failure, right? So the cost of failure is extremely high. And most of the times, while I may not go in depth in commenting around the business outcomes, it always starts with strategic alignment of the two businesses and the business outcomes they both want to drive. To enable that, a lot of times our leaders forget or underestimate the effort that is required on the culture side or the people side in integration. And that, in my mind, I have seen at least causing the most amount of challenges in M&As, right, in terms of for them to go smoothly. I'll give you examples, right? So if I think about one of the M&As in GE, so I gave you the top ones, but there were multiple others, smaller as well, that I was part of. So in one of the M&As, as an example, in Flipkart, the acquired company felt that their, you know, expertise and their talent was undervalued by us, right? They didn't feel respected. And that actually for us was one of the biggest challenges in how do we overcome that to make them feel valued, part of the team, and to also make sure they're treated the exact same way that any other employee is, right, in the company, was probably the biggest failure mode for us that we identified. Similarly, I think if I almost, like when you do, these kadas in Indian culture, you boil it down to the essence.
Right.
The essence always starts with respect, is my learning, right? So the biggest challenge I've seen emanating from if you do not respect each other, whether it is your talent, whether it is your expertise, whether it is your ways of working, whether it is leadership, right? So if I were to very quickly summarize, respect is where fundamentally the challenge starts.
True. Absolutely true. I think that is the bedrock of any relationship. In fact, whether you call it professional or otherwise. And thanks for pointing that out. On that front, we'll now go deeper into it, Prajakta, and would want to understand that culture clash is often the silent killer in M&As, right? How do you go about identifying culture mismatches early? And what steps do you recommend to harmonize value and behaviors of the two entities?
Got it. So let me ask you a question. When you invite people over, what are the 2-3 things you do for dinner?
You try to really understand their interests, or what is it which they like, their background, where do they come from. Let's say, for example, if I'm a North Indian inviting somebody from South India, it's not that I'm going to really serve a dish which is already they are really, really exposed to a lot. Maybe I would want to explore something which they would really appreciate and like. So keeping all of this in mind, you'll try to really prepare yourself for that meetup or for that dinner.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of research which you do about all of this when you're inviting somebody over, because you want the overall experience to be really amicable, really something which they would not be able to forget easily. It's an unforgettable experience. So I think it's more about the feeling which you want to create once the two of you are meeting. So you will accordingly prepare for it.
Great. So you pretty much have answered my question for me. It's very similar in mergers and acquisitions, right? You need to understand each other, and a lot of it depends on the preparation. So I'll give you an example. In one of the M&As that I was part of and leading, what we did was we brought the leadership teams of both the organizations together. And we did this over a period of a few months regularly. The conversations were primarily focused around 2 things only. One was understanding each other's culture. And when I say culture, it's not only what is written on your websites, which are your espoused values, but it's fundamentally how do you operate, right? What do you see today in the culture as a behavior that you really like about your culture, you really value about it? And what are those things that you really feel you don't like in the culture that you have as a company today? And you share that with each other. And you say that if we have this opportunity to create something new, what would I keep? What would I not, right? And I think the beauty in this merger that I was part of was that we did these sessions across every region. And that information then was taken by the central team, and we created a new culture that we wanted for the merged entity. I thought that was a beautiful way of acknowledging each other's pluses, minuses, allowing leaders to listen to each other, learn from each other without judgment, and then having that opportunity to co-create a new culture that both felt were important for this new organization, right? So that's one example I can give you. But there are nuances when it comes to a merger versus an acquisition. This was a merger of two almost equivalent organizations coming together, right? The second example I can give you is of an acquired company. So we don't necessarily always have the option of creating new culture or values if you're acquiring a company, right? You automatically, I hate to use the word impose, but that's how the employees of that acquired company feel, that you're imposing your culture on me. So what we did was we actually sat down as the COE team at that point with the HR leaders of the business that we had acquired, and we understood from them their culture, their values, and we mapped out pretty much in an Excel sheet to begin with what are the similarities, what are the differences, and why those differences exist, right? So when we took it to employees, we took it that way, saying that, hey, this is who we are, this is who you are, this is the similarity you're going to find in us operating together, these are the differences you're going to find, but here is why, we are different. This is because of an XYZ value that we have, because of which this is a value that we, hold extremely core to us, and so on, right? So I think that was the other example of, an acquisition where there was no choice, but we chose how to implement it, right? And do it more empathetically and by helping employees understand why.
Very important points you highlighted in this conversation, Prajakta, that, it's not necessary that every time there has to be a merged culture or a new culture which will come out of the two entities who are going through a merger and acquisition. Sometimes you have to keep that distance, or you have to give that space to each other, wherein, the standalone cultures, they operate in themselves. However, the overall, the governance, from a governance perspective or from an operations perspective, there are things which both the companies are abiding by, right?
Yeah.
So it's an important takeaway. Now, coming back to a very important point which you highlighted, that there is imperative role which is played by the leadership of the two entities.
Absolutely.
So my next question is basically going to be in that. In your experience, how do leadership teams from both companies need to show up during the integration phase, and how can HR facilitate leadership alignment?
Got it. For me, I think I am a true believer in, that culture begins from leaders, right? I've seen enough and more examples where, irrespective of org culture in a team, when a leader changes, there are a lot of things that change for that team, right? I'm sure you've experienced that as well. So, when I think about how leaders ideally should show up, and of course, not everybody shows up that way, but we can talk about what the right way is, at least from my perspective. And I'm sure a lot of folks out there would have their own perspectives based on their experiences. I've boiled it down to pretty much 4 C's in my head. For me, what I've seen work in M&As is when leaders show up with clarity, with collaboration, with communication, and with constructive approach, right? And maybe I'll explain a little bit what I mean. Clarity is about why we are doing this, how is this going to impact us, and what are the benefits we are going to see for each other as a result of this, right? The clarity of strategy, the goals, the outcomes we are trying to achieve. I think that's the first and most important thing. The second, when I say collaboration, I mean around listening skills, and I mean around truly a give and take. Because there are things you have to let go. There are things that are extremely important you cannot let go. The third element, which is communicative. And I know that we haven't spoken about that yet, but in my mind, communication holds a very, very critical key in any M&A, right? In normal organization culture for sure, but in M&A even more so. Because in M&As, you will see a lot of rumors, you will see a lot of hypotheses, you will see a lot of anxiety, right? That pervades the entire ecosystem. And if you don't have a very strong communication mechanism and leaders front-ending it, you see a lot of things go wrong. And the last piece of it is constructive. The reason I say constructive is because nothing is perfect. and nobody is perfect. So if a leader comes from the point of view that I know it's not perfect, we are not going to be perfect, but what we have to do is get as close to it as we possibly can by giving the most amount from what I can do, right?
Yeah.
As an individual, from an effort and hard work perspective. And if you have that, I think that's where a leader can also create a culture where it's very open. It's okay to talk about what's not going well. And it's okay to discuss how do we then get there as a team together. So I think those are the 4 C's that I feel are very, very important in how leaders show up in an M&A. And from an HR perspective, I think it's like anything that we do in HR. We are involved in from start to finish. If you think about a fabric that you and I are wearing, it's interwoven with different threads.
Yes.
And I think us as a function, as HR, we see those threads because we look at the entire organization as a system. And if we are able to see where those threads are either missing or they're getting loose, you need to tighten, it's our job to be the mirror for the business and to bring them together and facilitate, influence the right course of action, right? So I think that's what at least I feel we should be doing as a function.
So beautifully, you gave the example of fabric here. What role does communication play during M&A transitions? And how do you structure your internal communication strategy to avoid anxiety and, the most important, resistance?
So that's not an easy question to answer for sure, but I can try. Okay. So if I were to ask you, right, how do you know in any relationship you trust somebody? What would your answer be?
I think trust is a very instinctive process, and plus it's also over a period of time you kind of develop it. When I say over a period of time it develops, it happens when you see actions, when you see whatever is being said is being executed or done in action, right? So it helps in building that trust. When I say instinctively, a lot of times there is this, like I said, everybody has these, we all know that, energy plays a very important role. So a lot of things around you happen wherein you have this, intuition, or you have this instinct, which is there, in terms of trusting a process, trusting a leader, or trusting a person, right? So I feel that these are the two important elements from my end, which play which play a role in terms of really building trust between two people or two entities.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll probably pick up one of the elements that you said to highlight more on what I feel about this element within M&A, right? So when I think about communication, it is a vehicle, right? You're using it to build trust with your teams. And you have to be deliberate about it, right? And how you're saying, how often you're saying, right? So I think from a communication perspective, if I were to summarize, people are smart. They are able to see through smoke mirrors. So it's always better to be open, authentic, transparent, and do it regularly. So one other example I can give you is where while you may not think it's a typical communication example, I feel it is communication, but I'll tell you why. So we created this platform where we basically asked every business unit to talk about who they are, what they do, who their customers are, and what are some of the key priorities that they have. And we did that including with the merged entity, right? While technically it is not communication, it is a way to make people feel included and get them to understand the whole and look beyond where they are, right, as a silo. So I think that also kind of, for me, is an example of what you can do in communication to bring people together.
Right. Very true. I think this reminds me of a time when I was working with one of the organizations, and you won't believe that there were rumors going on, and people started talking, and there was a all hands call or a town hall which was arranged, and we all knew that CEO is on his annual vacation along with his family in the US, and everybody was surprised that how is this happening? And you wouldn't believe this. authenticity, which you talked about in your conversation, is so important.
Yeah.
Because this CEO actually took that call, spoke to all of us, shared this news with all of us that there are, talks which I'm sure you would be hearing. Board members have called me up and they have spoken to me, and it's exactly the same, way, the way you are feeling and going through whatever emotions is exactly the same with me also. Because he was apparently the founder CEO of that organization. And he shared all his apprehensions, but he also, gave that entire plan and how he was really, informed and, convinced about this for everybody's, prosperity and the growth of the overall organization.
Yeah.
So I think this, I am able to remember after you spoke about,
It does.
that the communication at the right time with that authenticity is so much important that, it creates that trust in the employees rather than really chaos and, apprehensions and anxieties.
See, and one thing you spoke about, which is also very important along with that, is vulnerability.
Yes.
What your founder CEO did was he was vulnerable.
Yes.
Right? Saying that I am also equally stressed out about this, right? And
so important that, an executive who's feeling probably a little insecure about his job. Similarly, the CEO is talking about that, it's the same for me. Imagine in my role, at my level, I might just, be informed that, okay, fine, your time is over here. Right? So true that, Okay, so with that, I think we would want to talk about on a question which is related to all such emotions. How do you ensure employee engagement and morale remain intact, especially when uncertainty, role redundancies, or structural changes are expected during an M&A?
So you're aware about the change curve, right? Those 7 stages that you go through, whether it is shock, despair, and so on, all the way down to integration, finding an integration. I think the important piece in any culture integration, especially when you think about employees, is to understand that every person is different and every person reacts to change differently, including us. I don't think the first reaction of change, unless there is a very different kind of change that, you're going to get a 50% hike, right, is going to be super happy or positive, right? Everybody will go through those emotions. The important piece, especially when you come to employees, is to acknowledge that this is a tough time for everybody. Acknowledge that you will have a lot of questions on your mind. Acknowledge that I will have answers to most of them, which I will share with you. But there might be questions that you have that I don't have answers to today. But the moment I do, you'll be the first person to hear it, right? And the fact that irrespective of what happens down the line, we will ensure fairness and empathy in everything that we do, right? We are not going to be knee-jerk, and we're not going to, treat people with disrespect, or we're not going to be unfair, right? So that's a personal kind of almost promise you have to make to your employees as they go through it, right? And if you are looked upon as a trusted leader, employees generally calm down, right, is what I've also seen. So when you think about morale and so on, right, I remember one of the things that I had done was actually did an employee survey because it was a big merger. It was across different locations in India. It was not possible to get a pulse of everybody, right? So we did an actual anonymous, was it anonymous or confidential? I think it was a confidential survey that we ran, where we asked people how they were feeling, what were some of the biggest concerns that they had, and what would their expectations from us be as leaders, right? And I can't tell you how helpful that was because people, they knew it was confidential and they shared what they had to. And for us at the beginning of the journey, we knew what our people were thinking, right? So the plan that we put together revolved around what we had heard back from our employees. And every time we went into a conversation, we said, hey, this is what we've heard from you. And we know this is important and hence we are focusing on this, right? So to give you an example, one of the biggest things that came up was career for them, right? Will I have a job? Will I see career progression? Will my role be safe, right? All of those, that was probably top 1 or 2, concerns. From an employee perspective that they had. So every conversation that we had, whether it was in all hands, whether it was in one-on-ones, whether it was in small group forums, we would make sure we spoke about that, right? And answered that concern that they had. So I think that consciousness around and pulse of what your employees are thinking, they're concerned about, and keeping an open door policy during that time more so than any other time, I think is very, very crucial to making sure that your employees feel engaged and morale is, if not high, at least is not negative.
Yeah.
Right? And you're helping people move towards positive as quickly as possible.
How do you handle key talent retention during M&As? What kind of retention strategies or incentives have worked well for you? And when I'm asking this question is purely from that standpoint, that one is that we want, as part of the manpower planning and, as part of the M&A, you've carved out those roles which have become redundant, and you would want, those employees either to be, moved, transferred within the organization as much as possible, which I know, from being in HR, because that's the first step we try to really do.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, the applicable, policy which is there, giving them that benefit and, letting them go. But it's very important to really understand that, what could be the retention strategies which are supposed to be there during that phase, because, it's about those ones who are left behind. They are also impacted.
Yeah.
There is also this sword of anxiety which is hanging on their head.
Yeah.
So how do you handle that?
So I think one thing anybody who's going through an M&A needs to be clear about is you cannot retain everyone. It's just not going to happen. The question is the people that you and the business need. What can you do to retain them? And that percentage cannot be 70%. Right? So it all starts with, where is the business today? Where does the business want to go? And who are the key people who are going to take it there based on your best estimate today? So these could be people who are critical from a skill set perspective. These could be people or teams that are working on extremely critical projects that are important for you. These could also be people who you see as your future, right? Like succession or future leaders who you want to bet on and want to make sure you retain, right? So if I look at broadly these kinds of buckets of talent, those are the people you have to first be clear about. Because if you don't have clarity on who your talent is and why you think that is your key talent, I think it's very hard to then put retention programs around it. So once you have this, let's say you figured out who your key talent is, why they are your key talent, how long do you need them, then you figure out what are the retention frameworks or mechanisms that you can use. It also, by the way, depends on the organization, right? So if you are an old school manufacturing organization, cash heavy. If you're a more new age, or startup kind of organization, stock options, right? So I think it depends also, the strategy will depend on who you are as an organization and what your employees also will value. But most of the retention strategies are focused around only two aspects. The second is a minor aspect. The primary is always rewards, right, in retention strategies. So what I've seen work very well, there are three things I've seen work very well. One is ESOPs or your stock options, right? So which have, let's say, a vesting period that matches the duration that you need that employee to stay and is meaningful enough for that person to be very difficult to be affordable outside, right? So that's the first one. The second would be cash. So let's say you give a retention bonus, and that retention bonus also, there are multiple ways of doing it. You can have a 1 year or 2 year or 3 year, whatever it is. It can be paid in one time. It can be paid in tranches. So, right, there are different mechanisms in which you do it. But I think retention bonuses that are a significant percentage of their salary. So let's say anytime it becomes 25% approximately, 20 to 25%, 30% of what their current cash is, it becomes sizable enough for somebody to think twice about leaving. The third, in my mind, is linked to the objectives, right? So, for example, you complete. I've seen that generally with founders, right? You hold this till 1 year or till end of second year or till end of third year, and you have payouts that are linked to anniversaries, right? At the end of 1 year, you'll give this much. At the end of second year, you'll give this much, and you have a linkage to the business outcome that the founder is also driving. Milestones. So that is the third kind of strategy I've seen work as well. All three actually can be successful. in my mind. The minor one that I spoke about is making sure, while I'm saying it's minor, now that I think about it, that conversation cannot be underestimated. I'll give you an example as well. So the minor one that I mentioned and then now hesitated to call it minor is letting the person know they're important, right? You let the person know that, hey, you are an amazing talent. We love having you on the team. We think very highly of you and we think you're going to go along with us. And we want to invest in you. And this is a way of us showing that we are invested in you and you're important for us, right? And we'll take care of your career as and when it progresses. I think that conversation is equally important. The reason I'm saying that is I was very recently talking to a senior leader who was given a huge amount of stock options. And he was wondering, saying that, hey, I've gotten this, but I don't feel treated like I'm important, right? There are decisions made where I'm not there. There are things that happen that I feel my opinion is not valued. Am I really important? So the actions, the say-do that you had spoken about earlier matters a lot. It's not only about retention from giving money or giving options. It's about how you treat that individual after that and throughout, and what messaging you land with that employee as well, right? So both become important in retention strategies.
So true. It should not be just tick in the box. It should actually, live up to its value, right? Okay, so we'll further go down on that one. When it comes to aligning performance management, rewards, which we talked about, and policies post-merger, what are the top challenges and how do you navigate them?
Okay. I don't think anybody can teach you how to navigate those, right? In HR, the two most heavily debated, as well as the ones that people have the strongest emotions for, are performance and rewards.
Yes.
Everything else can be worked out. But these two, everybody has an opinion on. And people will debate it till cows come home.
Yes.
So I think the piece that I have seen, I can talk about challenges that I've seen because that was part of your question, right? I think performance management, the biggest challenge people have is especially organizations which are very heavily rating-oriented, meritocracy-oriented, and have very strong rewards linked to your rating. Merges with an organization that doesn't do that, I think your top performers are are chances of getting disengaged, right? So I think performance management as systems generally have been created to drive behaviors in an organization, because that's how you tell somebody, this is the behavior I will reward, this is the behavior I will punish, and that drives behavior in an organization. So that is the biggest challenge I've seen in performance management systems. It's primarily about making sure you understand each other's systems. What are they trying to drive? What are the similarities, differences? And when it comes to taking a call, you have your leaders along with you, collaborating with you in how you're designing the next performance system. Or if you're going with yours in an acquired organization, will you give any leeway to them or not, right? And flexibility within the framework, depending on what they feel is important. Or are you going to impose it exactly as is? There is no choice, unfortunately. And then how will you go about doing that? So I think the entire piece on performance management is very, very sensitive. And you have to make sure that the culture that we spoke about, the values that we spoke about of that entity, the performance management system talks to that. That's the easiest way to convince employees that this performance management system works. This is why we think it will work. And this is how it is connected back to the culture you remember we spoke about and the values you remember we spoke about. This is what will help drive it, right? And we are open to feedback. Give us feedback. If there are ways in which we can make it better, we'll do that, right? So I think that's almost like the answer to the challenge as well that you will face. The second, which is benefits or rewards, it always comes down to cost versus benefit, right? Now, I've been part of organizations that were much larger than the entities that they brought in, right? Especially in Flipkart. In cases of, let's say, GE, most of them were the same way. I was also part of the Alstom integration from a university recruiting perspective. So what does happen in those cases is that you pretty much have to go with what your rewards or benefits policies are, right? Uh, Luckily for us, most of the times, 80% was better, 20% was maybe not as, like where they would feel that they were losing out, right? But because 80% was better, the 20% was managed. So the third challenge is perception. In any kind of M&A where you're doing performance and rewards, because perception is reality for people, and you have to make sure that in your communication, in the way you're messaging it, the perceived value is seen, right? So people know. So I'll give you an example, right? In one of the M&As, people could get, let's say, your books and periodicals, like that old school, this, right, reimbursed and stuff like that. So they were thinking, oh no, right, this is something that we're going to lose. But we had, let's say, reimbursement for broadband, for television, for telephones and this and that, right? So there was a plus and minus on both sides, right? So this one was tax benefit. This is an additional benefit, right? So you don't have to worry. It kind of comes out to be the same thing. So those kinds of like minor things which seem small, but they really matter to our employees, you have to be very cognizant about, and you have to address it proactively when you're talking to them about what is changing for them, right? And why it is changing for them, and perception of how this is going to help you or how this makes it better for you. So I think that's the most important piece, I think, as well, which is the perception of cost and benefit. But as an organization, you know that you have to keep cost at the center when you are doing all of this, and make sure that you're not becoming too expensive as well.
Now we'll move to the next question, Prajakta, which is many HR leaders get caught up in transactional work during M&As, right? How can HR elevate its role to become a strategic advisor in such high stakes, transitions which are happening for both the organizations involved?
Yeah. I'll be honest. You cannot become a strategic advisor overnight. As a function, you should already have credibility as a strategic partner for it to work in M&As as well.
Right. True. True.
I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but that's what I've seen, right?
True.
Because as a function, if you've been looked at by leaders as a function which is transactional, in M&As, things are not going to change, right? They will use you only for transactions, and they will not kind of maybe use you as a strategic partner, right? And you'll have trouble gaining foothold in that direction. So I think first and foremost, hopefully, as a function, you are already looked at as a strategic advisor. Because if you are, in M&As, automatically it translates to being a strategic advisor, right? Strategic advisor is something which you build as credibility over a period of time. If you understand business, you understand business numbers, you understand business priorities, you understand the intent behind that merger or that acquisition, and what is trying to get accomplished through that merger and acquisition, I think that's the most important part for an HR professional to start that journey of credibility. The second part of it is having strong expertise in your own function. So making sure you understand policies, procedures, you understand the culture, you are able to take a step back, see the forest before the trees, and you're able to have those conversations in the right forums with your leaders to help them understand what they may be missing, right? I think is very, very important from a strategic perspective. The other piece that helps and that cannot be stressed enough is preparedness. So in one of my organizations, we had actually created a playbook for M&A. And that then talks about the minus that you and I were talking about at the beginning, all the way down to the plus.
Yeah.
Saying that this is the playbook that as a function we recommend on how you should start with due diligence from a people perspective. What are the things you have to be careful about during the actual announcement, the initial few days, and then sustaining it through, let's say, a year or a year and a half. And if you have developed that playbook, that also kind of helps you in being a strategic advisor. And transactions, by the way, I'm not undermining or underestimating transactional work. It is extremely important, right? Because it's pretty much like every drop makes an ocean. Every transaction moves you in the direction of perfection.
Right.
So you have to make sure your transactions are really well thought out and you're doing them well. for that playbook, for that strategy to succeed. So I don't think transactional is bad. It's just that transaction without strategy will not take you in the direction that you want to go. And you will never know whether you're going in that direction or not. So I think that's the piece about being a strategic advisor. It's about the business first, understanding that context first, then the people, and then basically your entire plan of how will you, a thought through plan, and how you will take people across.
Right. So true. I've heard this statement so many times at so many organizations where they say that, why is HR so reactive? Why can't you guys be proactive?
Yes.
Right. So I think you brought that important point to the forefront here in this discussion, Prajakta, that it's so important to be prepared. And this playbook of integration for M&A is so important here to really keep a note that if you are preparing in advance, that what are the nuances which are going to be there, what are the steps which are supposed to be taken, and not just from a strategic point of view, but transactional, which becomes the base of it. For example, you rightly pointed out, it's so important to inspect the forest first before you start planting trees, right? So I think this is for the audience's takeaway, to really focus on the preparedness, for any M&A, or not just M&A, overall, for the function. The perception of the function, if for BAU it is strategic, then for M&A also it's going to be strategic.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if it's administrative, transactional, no matter whatever, because it's just a project.
Yes.
Right? One project. So generally, if you are perceived like that, then it will continue like that. Otherwise, it will carry on. Okay. So with that, we will... Before we let you go, Prajakta, for the day, we will have a quick rapid fire round. Short questions, instinctive answers.
Oh my goodness.
Let's keep it fast and fun.
All right. I will try and make it fast.
One word to describe HR's role during an M&A.
Strategic.
Okay, great. What's tougher, cultural alignment or process alignment?
Culture.
Okay. One M&A myth you want to burst forever. People are going to lose their jobs. Always.
Yeah, I guess you can see that.
Yeah. Or something else. I mean, I'm just saying it.
Every M&A comes with job loss.
If you could give one piece of advice to your younger HR self during your first M&A experience, what would it be?
Have the courage to speak up.
Great. I love that. Can so relate to it. Because this is just not for M&A experience. I think this is for any new experience.
It's for everything.
Yeah.
True.
What's your go-to stress buster during intense M&A integrations?
Nothing like home.
Okay.
It has to be home, right? I have a hug from my daughter and my 2 cats.
Oh, wow.
My husband will be very unhappy if I don't mention him, but maybe him too.
All right. Okay. I hope he is going to watch this and this would be worth. All right. The last one. Okay. A book or podcast you recommend for HR professionals navigating change or transformation?
Actually, I love 2 frameworks. I don't know if you want to hear it as a podcast or you want to read a book. That's an option. One is GE's change acceleration process. I really love it. Got certified in it very early in my GE career, and I truly believe it's very, very thought through. It really helps you think through how you want to land change. And the second is the ADKAR model, which is ProSci. So I've gone through certification for that as well, and I really loved it because I think it's very scientific, it's very detail oriented, and it pushes you to plan. So those would be the 2 that I would recommend.
Okay. All right. That was fun, Prajakta. Thanks for being a sport there.
Yeah, thanks for springing it on me.
I intentionally kept it secret.
Yeah.
All right. So this was, this brings us to the end of this incredibly rich and thought-provoking episode, I would call it, Prajakta. a huge thank you to you
My
for
pleasure.
generously sharing not just the framework around the M&A integrations, but also really helping our audience to understand that how HR becomes the cornerstone of any successful M&A integration, right? And also, there is one important point which has come up from this discussion today is that, beyond the balance sheets and the integration trackers, it's the people and culture, they are truly, something which determines the outcome of a merger. So, if you found this useful, do like, share, and follow us at Tallect Talks. We keep on sharing such episodes with the senior and experienced HR professionals on different topics. Uh, uh, Subscribe to our channel, which is on YouTube. We also release it on our LinkedIn handle by the name of Tallect. Until next time, this is Neha Sethi signing off. Stay curious, stay human, and let's keep on building the future of work together. Thank you.